Welcome into Flag for Discussion, episode 30 for Monday, September 22nd. My name is Farbod Merkazi. He is Jace Hatfield. We got so much to talk about. First of all, Penn State, Georgia, and Clemson this year are now 0-12 combined against the spread. James Franklin is 1-15 against top 5 opponents. He's 2-21 against AP top 6 opponents, 4-21 against top 10 opponents, 15-30 against top 25 opponents, 4-17 against Michigan, Ohio State. You want to throw Oregon in there, 4-19. What a Saturday. What a week 5. We got so much to talk about. Jace, how we doing?
Fantastic. We got Victory Sunday. We got early morning Dublin NFL football on. It's a great day. Sunshine.
Oh my God. Do you realize how, I think when we started this show, we were like, let's not be homers. But there's just some games we can't avoid that. And the feeling that we have right now would be the exact opposite if that overtime game ended the wrong way. So there's ways for us to be objective here, because it was very close for Penn State and James Franklin to squeak that out, but they didn't. We'll get into all of that. Before we get into it, make sure you're following us on Twitter at F4Discussion, on TikTok at flag4Discussion. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts at Flag for Discussion, and on YouTube at Flag for Discussion. Make sure you're subscribed. Jace would love that. Jace will personally send you a smiley face on Twitter if you follow us or subscribe to us. All right, let's get into the big game. Well, there were two big games. There were a couple big games, but let's get into the one that we want to talk about first. Number 6 Oregon defeats number 3 Penn State 30-24 in double overtime. Go.
Okay, I like this. So I'll start with the Ducks just off the bat. Dante Moore really settled into that game in the second half. I think he's going to get his flowers, as he should. The first half, he definitely looked nervous. He had the happy feet. You could tell his head was zipping around the field. He was kind of going through progressions too quickly, which caused him to not throwing miss, but like not throw to an open receiver. But he settled into that game. That's really good coaching. After the game, Dante Moore had said, Dan just kept saying to me, take a deep breath, take a deep breath. And that's really impressive. On the road, night game, you traveled 2,000 plus miles to be there. To settle in mid-game and then play your best football in the fourth quarter and overtime is incredibly impressive for a guy in his first true, like, big atmosphere start. Some quarterbacks take years. Like, some quarterbacks don't figure it out until 5-6 years in the NFL. Some quarterbacks with all the talent in the world never figure it out, and they just don't make it. He was able to figure that thing out in a couple quarters, which was incredibly impressive. And there's a lot of players in this team that are going to get their flowers. The skill position players for Oregon played really well. The defense, until they got very gassed at the end of the game, played incredibly well. But the one group that I think is not going to get the credit they deserve is specifically the interior O-linemen of the Oregon defense. Going into this game, the tackles got a lot of question marks because Oregon tackles would be able to hang on. And they did for the most part, and they've gotten their flowers for that. But no one's really talked about how dominant the Oregon interior offensive line was in that game. They were controlling their run game. They showed their communication. They were flawless in communication. They had the hand signal system, the tap system. They were all on the same page. They were all on par. They were keeping up with snap counts. And they dominated. They didn't let up any pressures up the middle, which is usually a Penn State staple. And they were so good in the run game. It felt like whenever Oregon needed 1, 2, 3 yards, they could just run right behind their interior O-line, and they got it. That's just, I want to call them out. I haven't heard them get their flowers on Twitter yet, and I want to make sure they do.
You're absolutely right. Another group that needs their flowers and probably won't get it because of that touchdown, the first Penn State touchdown in the fourth quarter, the deep shot from Drew Allar, really good throw, is the Oregon secondary. People don't realize most of that secondary is true freshmen. And whether you'd like to say, like, whether you have positive things or not to say about Penn State's pass game or their receivers, there isn't much positive to say there, but they're much more talented than they were last year. One of the reasons they went out and got 3 transfer wide receivers this offseason was because last year, if you remember, in that semifinal loss to Notre Dame, Penn State had 0 receivers to catch a pass. And that's just not a winning formula if you want to win the biggest games. It's not, you got to target your receivers every time, but you got to at least get them involved and show that aspect of your game. So Trevor Pena, Kyron Hudson, they came in, they made some plays, But even the broadcast noticed, like, man, these guys haven't been targeted very much. These guys haven't been attacked very much. But at the same time, like the Oregon secondary was dominant. I think that's where I want to lead us off into this game. And you did a great job with the O-line take because I think a lot of people aren't going to give them their flowers either. This is a game. This is two separate games for me. This is an unbelievable atmosphere. Shout out to the Penn State faithful who showed up and showed out. This is that whiteout from the TV viewing experience was really cool to watch, and honestly it was really fun to like watch it as quote unquote my team is in it because we've only seen it where with other teams in it. And also, mind you, this is Penn State's first like real whiteout since Auburn, I think in 2021, because in the past it's been either noon games that it doesn't have the same feel, or it's been against non-ranked, unranked opponents. This time they had the whiteout at home obviously at home at night against a top 6 opponent, and the fans showed out. So I want to give flowers to the Penn State fans. And second, I saw the stat 111,015 people, second most attendance in Beaver Stadium history. So got to give them their flowers. But for me, this was a tale of two separate games. I think the story of the game itself in the first half was, man, Oregon's being really conservative because you and I, every drive, you and I were texting. That looks like Oregon's offense. Like it was like it might have been a 4-yard run, but like the feel of it was like, oh, that's part of the Oregon run game. And then there would be a couple plays here, a couple plays there. Maybe they were calling more shots downfield. Maybe they were calling more stuff that could have turned into explosive, but Dante was either hesitant or being protective with the ball and chose to just keep it or throw it away, which to your point, you commend him for that. But it felt like they were trying to protect themselves from themselves instead of Oregon being what Oregon is like, if this shot doesn't work, focus on the next play. If they pick it off, whatever, focus on the next play. Because the offense theoretically has enough juice and firepower to constantly be in games. So that was, I think, the story of the first half offensively for Oregon. The story first half defensively for Oregon. Whatever misgivings we had or anyone had about the Oregon run defense, they shut you up. Oregon's run defense, Oregon went in there with a plan and expectation to shut down Penn State run game. Penn State at the end of it, obviously this is through 2 overtimes, finished with 139 rush yards, about 4 yards an attempt. Decent, but last year against Oregon in the Big Ten championship game, Penn State had 297 rush yards. So this was clearly a point of emphasis, and Oregon did exactly what you and I said in our preview show. Make Drew Allar have to play hero ball. Make Drew Allar have to put on the Superman cape. And if they win, it's because Drew Allar made the plays. And I just saw a tweet right before we hopped on from a Penn State beat writer that said Dante Moore made every play when Oregon needed him to, and Drew Allar made no play when Penn State needed him to.
That's a tough. I will say Drew Allar did make some key plays. Were they pretty? Not always, but he did make some with his feet. And then there was a couple third down conversions where it looked like he was going to get sacked, and he might have been a prayer, but it was completed. The touchdown pass he threw is genuinely a very nice touchdown pass. If he underthrows that, it's probably picked. So I'll give him his flowers there. But like you said, like Drew Allers doesn't strike. Even going into the game, we both believed make Drew Allers beat with his arm. He might make 1 or 2 or 3 throws, but he's not going to make 4 or 5 or 6 without a detrimental one. And that's exactly what happened. In OT, he made some plays in regulation that kept him in this game, but Oregon kept forcing him to beat them. And in OT, that was the detriment to Penn State. I think the problem with Drew Allers is exactly what happened with that interception. It was not an open receiver, and it was not a good throw, but it was the structure. Like you could tell that was supposed to be his first read, and you could just tell he kind of panicked, just threw a ball that he felt like he should, not because he was open, but because that's what the play dictates. He underthrew it, but even if he like hits the guy, it could have been picked by the safety behind him, or the guy was going to get murdered. He did get hit hard on the sideline anyways. That's the Drew Allar experience, and I think that is Oregon executed the game plan perfectly of shutting down the run. And you mentioned that they struggled in the run game. The majority of those yards came on the final 2 drives, anyways, of that game in the first OT for them. Up until then, I think it was like 68 rushing yards until those final couple drives where that was more of a product where it looked like the Oregon defense was just gassed than it looked like a product of, oh, Penn State's figured this thing out.
I think for me, it was, I almost don't want to even put it on. I mean, Drew Allar was the reason they lost. The second game in a row against Oregon, dating back to the Big Ten championship game. The game ends with a backbreaking pick thrown by Drew Allar. Also, the last big game Penn State had against Notre Dame in the semis, game ended with a backbreaking Drew Allar interception. I almost feel like maybe this is too philosophical for a Monday morning podcast from us, but it's a reflection of the Penn State, however they structured that offense, where it's you're relying so much more on your run game to be the heroes. Not that you need to rely on your quarterback to be the hero, but like it feels like when you see Dante Moore back there, he might be under duress. He might not be able to hear his receivers, his offensive play caller. He might not be able to. He might have to be using a silent count with his offensive line. But did you see his face? He was calm as hell, and he knew that the game wasn't all on him. The pressure wasn't all on him. It was just him to make it was just on him to make the right decisions. So I do think there were part of like the first half that I was mentioning that Dante Moore went into that and said, like, he's dropped back, saw a throw he could make, but he was like, nah, I'm going to be safer. I'm going to go take 4 and just run up the sideline a little bit, or take 5, run up the middle. The second part of the game that I mentioned, like this is a tale of 2 games, was that fourth quarter where it was clear Oregon off of not a bye, where Penn State was off of a bye. Oregon traveling across country, Oregon playing the night game, body clocks are off. The defense was gassed. And credit to Penn State. They not only came back, they had the lead at one point in overtime. I think you and I both thought when Jordan Davison scored the touchdown to take it to 17-3, that was game. And credit to Penn State, credit to Drew Allar, credit to that Andy Kolnicki for devising up a game plan in that fourth quarter and calling the right plays to bring him back. I just feel like if that was always in your playbook, then why were we so married to the runs? Because you texted me this in the first half. The Penn State offense is not like bad. It's stale. They weren't trying anything. They weren't aggressive. They were running the ball left, running the ball right. And then if those got stuffed, it was like a lateral pass from Drew Allar to hoping that like a screenplay would blow up. There was a pass on like the second drive of the game, a screenplay that Mario Washington read it really well, and it looked like Drew Allar was throwing it right to him. Now Drew Allar did the right thing, threw it over him, but he looked at the Oregon defender right in front of him and threw his direction. Like, what are we? There's just some things about the Penn State offense that just did not strike fear in anyone's hearts. And I think that's why Oregon knew they could go into this and be conservative and protect the quarterback, protect the offense against that crowd until the crowd calms down a little bit. Because let's say you're playing USC's offense, not USC's defense, but you're just like, if Penn State had USC's offense or Penn State had Ohio State's offense last year, you have no chance if you're going to be that conservative for Oregon. Right? Like the other team's going to put up points and put up points at least on 30%, 40% of their drives. Penn State and Oregon both had 3 points in the first half, and I think a lot of that was because that was Penn State's offense putting up 3 points, and that was Oregon's game plan, not Oregon's offense. That's why you and I kept texting each other like, this isn't great, but it still feels like Oregon's offense is going to break through, because this isn't the Oregon offense. This is the Oregon game plan.
Yeah, that was what my comments to you were. I like at halftime, I was like, I feel like we have seen Penn State's ceiling offensively already. Like they're trying to do everything they want to do and they can't do it successfully. It felt like Oregon wasn't doing anything that they can do, and it looks like it looked like the first half was, let's just get Dante Moore settled into this game. Because I think what they were trying to avoid was an early game blunder that, 1, puts you down. 2, you don't want to kill Dante's confidence in that atmosphere. It's if you throw 1 pick early in that game, that crowd erupts, and then it's a whole nother then you got to play mind games with your quarterback too. So I think it was letting him settle into the game. I mean, they won, so it ended up being the right call. But it gave me a lot of confidence at halftime. Like, okay, we're not playing our best football. Penn State probably is. Let's get this thing settled in. And to answer your question you had a little bit ago, because I think it was a great question, like Drew Allar struggles with these picks in big games. Is that due to the offense and where they're at? And I think the answer is yes. A lot of people might point specifically at Drew Allar for those picks, and that's fair. But I think there's a bigger story than just him not being good. The early season games for Penn State, when they played these horrible, FCS schools, they were not lighting up the scoreboard, and they were not throwing the football or even really trying to throw the football in those games. Those are the games that Penn State needs to try to throw for 350 yards and try to force Drew Allers to have these big games and force him to play. Even if you're up 30, tell him it's 0-0 and force him to try and play hero ball, because the only time they don't let Drew Allers throw for 95% of the games they play. And then in the biggest moments of the season against the best teams, all of a sudden they expect him to just turn on this switch and go out there and make these crazy throws and outduel a quarterback who's used to doing that. They need to use those tune-up games, not to tune up Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. Those guys are already tuned up. I promise they're fine. You need to use those tune-up games to tune up your quarterback, so that way when he has to go play Oregon in a whiteout game with all eyes on him, it's not the first time all season he's throwing the ball more than 2 yards down the field. So, yeah, he's not making the plays he should. And when you have a five-star kid that gets NFL buzz, you expect him to make those plays. But I don't think in any way, shape, or form Penn State's doing him any favors or doing themselves as a team favors by just running the ball against Villanova. Throw the ball. Even if it results in 3 interceptions, get it out. Let him get a feel for what it means to play hero ball. Let him get a feel for what it is to throw down the field to your 3 transfer wide receivers. Let him build chemistry. And as long as Penn State keeps doing this where they just try and play this gross run style offense as much as they can until they don't have to, this is what's going to happen. You're going to get yourself in a position where you do need to come back. You do need a big play. You do need a touchdown. And you're going to have to rely on something your team's not used to. And this is the outcome of that. And it almost feels like they're trying to luck into some of these wins. And that's kind of what it felt like yesterday. They were trying to back their way into a win. It's just not going to work against good teams. And like, it's clear, like, it doesn't work in theory. And it's clear it doesn't. I mean, you went through James Franklin's stats already. 2-21 against AP top 6 opponents. That's abysmal. And it's because they try to play this ugly brand of football and back their way into these wins on the ground. And then if they need a touchdown, okay, let's just pray our quarterback can randomly figure it out on this given night. That's just not what happens against good teams. And I think that's a big reason why.
That's what I texted you this in the second quarter. I was like, don't call me a jinx, but this feels like the game that Penn State and Ohio State played last year and 2 years ago and 3 years ago. It was like, it's a tight game, a pick here, an intercept, like a sack there, all of a sudden makes this from a 3-3 game to a 17-3 game for Ohio State, and Ohio State ends up pulling away because their offense is trying to win the game. And to your point is, Penn State keeps trying to back into these wins, and it's not a factor of like you need to be throwing the ball every time. But I think if maybe Drew Allar is who Drew Allar is, and that's realistic, and he just has all the traits, but some of the potential is just not there. But I also would want to think, like, if Drew Allar went to a Lincoln Riley, if Drew Allar went to Will Stein, if Drew Allar went to Kenny Dillingham, if Drew Allar went to Mike Norvell, the best offensive coaches in the country, I think he would play a lot more free. And you're right. You're absolutely right. 50-60% of Drew Allar's struggles is in big games is because he's asked to do things that he's not asked to do in 11 of the other games he's played. He plays every year. But it's also a matter of, like, what is your program culture? Like, how there's a reason there's no reason at home in your whiteout game and the other team has to travel across country that the other quarterback looks more poised than you when you're a senior quarterback at home and that guy's a redshirt sophomore making his first big road start. Dante Moore looked more poised. Dante Moore looked more free, and Dante Moore looked more settled than Drew Allar. And go back to your point of Penn State constantly trying to back into these wins. For better or for worse, Dan Lanning is going to live and die by being aggressive. And he got a lot of hate for it in the Washington games a couple years ago kept going up for it on fourth down, kept not getting them. What I would argue though is going into this game, Dan Lanning made a point. Like we saw them. They went for fourth down 7 times. They got 5 of them. Dan Lanning and Oregon went into that game to win that game. Penn State went for it on fourth down 3 times. They went 3 for 3. Those were 4th and 1 runs, and when you have the run game you expect them to convert and get 1 yard. But like to me, it felt like Penn State went into that game trying to as the underdog. They didn't go into the game trying to win the game. They went into the game trying to, as you said, rely on the defense to stop Oregon so they can get better field position. And for me, it's like you're not Iowa. That's not how you should be playing. If Drew Allar, Penn State, yeah. If Drew Allar, Penn State, Katron Allen, Nick Singleton, Kyron Hudson, I almost wonder if those guys had a Texas jersey on right now, they would be projected to win the national title. And not that Penn State still can't, but they would be, I think, a lot more hyped up than they are right now, and they wouldn't be getting all the hate that they are right now. And there's a whole lot of conversation we can have right now about Bo Prabula, who Penn State essentially chased away, saying Drew Allar's our guy. He's at Missouri and having a great game, having a great season so far. There's so much conversation there. For me, it's just like unfortunate because Penn State doesn't go into games looking to win the game. It doesn't feel like it, at least. That's not the game plan. Doesn't feel aggressive enough. And I'm not saying you have to go for it on fourth down, but I'm saying like you have all of these advantages for you. I don't know what the furthest air yards pass thrown was from Penn State. It was like married to a run game.
It was probably
that clearly wasn't working. Yeah. Well, no, I mean, even the first half, the touchdown happened like that. Like the fourth quarter,
first half, it was probably 5 yards downfield.
Yeah. In the fourth quarter, I'll give them that because it was a great throw, great play, and they burned the Oregon secondary. But at the same time, they had to pass the ball at that point. They were down 17-3. When you're up 3-0 or tied 3-3, you technically don't have to pass the ball, but like that's your opportunity. You have a really good offensive coordinator. I just don't understand the game plan.
Yeah, I think if I'm a Penn State fan, I think exactly your frustrations you just shared would be my exact thoughts as a Penn State fan. You recruit in terms of talent, you have one of the best rosters in college football, and you do year in, year out. They always have NFL, at least players that are going to be hyped to the NFL. They always have high-end 4-stars and 5-star players. They also at that game, this is just a side note, a little tangent, but I saw there was like over 60 recruits at that game between like class of 2026, class of 2027. It might have been even more. I just saw like 4 and 5 stars. It was like 60 plus from 2026, 2027 commits, target flips, recruits, like players they're just going after. That is an awful look for Penn State to have all those kids there at your home whiteout game, not only to lose. And I don't know if you're a listener, I don't know how much of the game you watched. I think if you only watched the box score and like the end of the fourth quarter in OT, you probably thought, oh, that looks like a close game. If you watch the full game, it was a very dominant Oregon performance. And they had over 200 more yards going into the very end of the game than Penn State. It was very dominant, and it looked very one-sided. All those recruits are also looking at Oregon. That might have been the most beneficial Oregon recruiting weekend of their season, and that was probably one of the most detrimental. I don't know how much longer Penn State is going to recruit at the level they recruit at and then continue to put up these big game performances. At some point, like if you're a 5-star quarterback and you look at, 5-star Dante Moore, he is now the Heisman favorite. He's getting hyped up as going to be the first QB off the board this year. Look at how good he looks. Then you look at Drew Allar. He's gotten worse. It looks like he's getting worse every year. People are fine. I mean, people should have fallen off the first round hype for Drew Allar a while ago. That's a whole nother conversation. But how much longer can Penn State sustain this elite level recruiting before these kids eventually say, like, all right, like a lot of these guys they don't always get developed the way that you would think that they should. And they always lose in these big games. Like, at what point, if you're a recruit, are you like, oh man, like I'm a 5-star, I can go anywhere I want. Is this really what I want at the end of the day?
So I have a question for you. On that note, I just saw just for looking down my phone while you were talking, but I just saw what you were saying made me remember something I saw yesterday after the game, and I pulled it back up. This is from Penn State's 24/7 message board account. Mark Richt or Frank Solich. Basically, they're saying you fire Franklin at season's end if you think it's Solich. If you think it's Mark Richt, you fire Franklin at season's end. If you think it's Solich, you give Franklin a lifetime extension because if you're wrong, you're Nebraska. To give backup to that, Mark Richt was the good, not great Georgia head coach. Kirby Smart came in. He took him from good to elite, won a couple national championships. Obviously, they lost last night. We'll get into that. But Frank Solich went 58-19 at Nebraska, still not eclipsed them to where they wanted to be. They fire him, bring in Bill Callahan, and Nebraska becomes what we know Nebraska of being today. So that's the question. I don't want to I don't want to take a game of you technically losing by 6 to a top 6 opponent in a double overtime as a fireable offense. But I think if you look at the game, like for 80% of it, where Oregon dominated defensively and had control of the game offensively, that is the Penn State I think exists. If you are Penn State, is James Franklin your Mark Richt or Frank Solich?
I mean, it depends on who they hire after him, right?
But that's the point,
Probably,
right?
Yeah, that's true. Unfortunately, probably Frank Solich. I don't think Penn State as a school and a brand is a Georgia where like there's schools and programs. There's Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia. There's programs like that no matter how bad it can get, there's always going to be a work towards going to the best. And there's always going to be recruits that want to go there. And there's always going to be money at your program. And there's always going to be like that highest level of football. I don't know if Penn State has that brand and that ability to always be that. Now, I'm not saying that they can't be but I think it's like Nebraska where it's not like Georgia where you're kind of always going to be headed in that right direction no matter what, just due to resources and the amount of care you have around your school. I think it's more like Nebraska where you just don't have that to where you can have a bad season or two and then hire the wrong coach and like get out of it quickly and come up. I mean, even Michigan's a school that I think is that level of program. And even they had a down spell for a decade there until the Jim Harbaugh figured it out scenario. It's a whole different conversation, but you know what I mean? Like they were bad for 10, 15 years there until they won that national championship and got back. I don't think Penn State is as foolproof as Michigan, and it took Michigan quite a while. So the grass is not always greener on the other side. It's that's the toughest call to make. And exactly like you said, you can go one of two directions. I think if you're Penn State, personally, I'm somebody that I want a national championship. I don't really care about I'm not someone who's going to brag about winning a Rose Bowl or brag about winning, intermediate things. I want the national championship. And to me, if I'm bad, I'm bad. If it's either national championship or a bust, that's the way I see it as a fan. So I'm I would be, hey, let's get rid of Franklin. I'd rather be 6-6 with the upside of winning a championship. Yeah. Versus 10-2 every year and just losing every single big game. It's just, I don't think it's worth it. That's my personal opinion. But if you're not if you're someone who wins a Rose Bowl and that's good enough for me, then obviously I think you'd want Franklin to stick around. But if you want more than that, I do think you need to move on.
I was texting a buddy last night during the game because he was asking me about Franklin, and I said about why they're not firing him, or if they lose this game, they should fire him. And I said, look, the monetary value and social value of being 10-2 and relevant every year, despite having a bunch of heartbreaking losses and not eclipsing your ultimate towards your ultimate goal, that monetary value, that societal value is real, and it's really hard to fire. So for me, and then I also told him, I think if these percentages might be skewed, but I told him if you fire Franklin, 20% chance your program regresses. You hire a worse coach. You hire someone who doesn't know the program, doesn't know the area, doesn't recruit as well. It goes down. Not tanks, but goes down. You fire him, 20% chance your program elevates. You suddenly become that team that I don't think Oregon's that team that is going to eclipse Ohio State every year, but they're at the level where 1 out of every 2, 1 out of every 3, they should be able to eclipse them. Maybe if there's 20% chance that if you fire him, Penn State can reach that level. And I think there's a 60% chance you are going to get a carbon copy of what James Franklin is, because there's a very high likelihood this is the program ceiling. And you can hire a really great head coach. And right now we're seeing it. This is the best team James Franklin's had at Penn State. They have two bona fide NFL running backs that are seniors. They have a very good, not great quarterback, good at his best, but makes some boneheaded decisions and just isn't trusted by his offense to make bigger decisions. And you have better receivers than you did last year. You have Deniden Sutton still, Zane Durant. You have a really good secondary. You have a really damn good team. Mind you, you have Andy Kotelnicki, who is getting some early head coaching buzz in some circles, and probably not anymore after last night. You have Jim Knowles, who's widely regarded as the best DC in college football. You just made him the highest paid DC in college football history. Everything should be operating as maximum efficiency for you at Penn State, and you still let it go. And for me, that's one of the tough parts talking about this game. Not because you and I are theoretically Oregon homers, but more so because this game wasn't 30-24 to me. This game was 17-3, and Oregon got gassed, and Penn State had to throw. Andy Kotelnicki was allowed to take the cap off his offense and was allowed to actually run his offense. And they had to come back, and Oregon was gassed. Obviously, that has a part of it, and Oregon has to go fix those flaws, sure. But for me, this game was a 17-3, 20-3 game. And Oregon has some things to clean up, but that is what this Penn State team that is supposed to be at their maximum efficiency, their peak level of talent and coaching should be at. They could muster up 3 points through the first 3 quarters at home in their whiteout.
And let's be clear too. It's not like this is a singular one-off game that we're looking at. The lens is
no. This is
James
every
Franklin
game.
is 2-21. Yeah, this is just. I think that this is to me, this is like the what's the word? The encore of like, okay, we've seen James Franklin's set. We've seen what it is. We know what it is. It was like, finally, they have, like you said, they haven't had a big whiteout game in quite a while. All their big games, you could say, were on the road, or they were day games, or they were in bowl games. You have a regular season home whiteout. You're coming off a bye. Like, everything is going your way. You have the more experienced roster. You're playing a team who's played 4 straight weeks, flying across the country. They didn't get until late Friday night. Everything is going your way to win this game. And yeah, the box score is going to look a little closer. Like you said, they were dominated for 50 of the 60 minutes. And it took a defense getting gassed just for them to have a chance there at the end. I think if you're Penn State, you need to change. You need it bad. There's just, you can't have this much continuity in terms of losing in big games. And it's always the same strategy. And we talked about this. It's the same losing. They play losing football. Like, they try to control in the ground. They try and just bank on their defense making big plays. And then worst case scenario, we'll try and win it on offense. You should always be trying to win these big games. You need that killer mentality. It's what made Nick Saban great. It's what made Kirby Smart great. It's what made Dabo Swinney great. It's what's going to make Dan Lanning, I'll sound homer here, but it's what's going to make Dan Lanning great, and kind of already is. And if you don't believe that, if you want to call me a homer, listen to Nick Saban talk about Dan Lanning or Kirby Smart, and you'll see what I'm saying. It's what makes you great. And I think you can always live with losing because you tried to win, going for a big 4th down that you don't convert, something like that. But if it's in your hands, you can swallow that loss. But when you go into a game, when you go into 23 straight big games, only winning 2 of them, and the other 21 losses are because you kind of played loser football, like that's got to drive you mad. And I feel like at some point you need to change. You're too good of a team to do this. You have too much potential NFL talent. You have too many 5 stars. You have too many 4 stars. If you were a 3-star and you're all 3 stars and less, and you lose a big game like this, okay, sure. I grew up around Michigan State. Mark D'Antonio would lose a big game like this every now and then. Yeah, it's against Ohio State, who has 15 5-stars. Michigan State's got 2-star Le'Veon Bell and no star Kirk Cousins. So you can live with those losses. But if you're Penn State's, my entire D line is 4 and 5 stars. My entire O line's 4 and 5 stars. My quarterback's a 5-star. My running backs are 5 stars. My wide receivers were hot transfer portal receivers. Like my entire defense is going to be playing in the NFL in a year. Like you need better than this. You need a better performance than that. And I think it all comes back to the way James Franklin game plans and coaches in these big games. Not even in the big games, but as I mentioned, in the small ones. In the small games, not letting Drew Allar air it out. Just playing the same strategy. Like try those small FCS teams. That's when you try air raid offense. That's when you should try to let Drew Allar air it out. That's when you should try a go route 4 times in a row. Like try those things out. I mean, you're paying these schools to play them. Like you don't need to go easy on them and just run the ball the whole game.
Yeah, I was listening to, I'm sorry for forgetting which podcast it was, but I was listening to a podcast last Thursday or Friday breaking down this game. And the co-host, the guest they had on, was saying basically both Oregon and Penn State have treated this season so far, their first non-conference play, as the preseason NFL. Well, what I'll tell you is Oregon, it wasn't their fault that they treated this as preseason. Obviously, they scheduled Montana State, but they scheduled Oklahoma State. They had Northwestern in there, then they scheduled Oregon State. It's not their fault that the Power 4 competition that they scheduled is awful. But at least in those games, they put out so much tape. They put their offense in positions to try everything out. And there were a couple throws from Dante Moore this game against Penn State that you saw, you're like, all right, that was probably that probably needs a couple more weeks of work. There was a couple incompletions down the sideline that it just was miscommunication or something that wasn't working. But at least they tried it out and they got the team to air it out. Again, Penn State played FIU, Villanova, and Nevada. They didn't try to schedule anyone good, and worse than that, they didn't cover one time. They were like 40-point spread, so I'll give you that. But when you are a national championship bound team, or theoretically, as everyone predicted, then you needed to have covered in those games, or at least tried to. They went into those games thinking, well, we're going to win, so we're just going to try to keep it vanilla, try to keep some things going. Well, you know how that hurts you? Your team, this isn't your, like, Dan Lanning says it all the time. My team right now is not the same team that won the Big Ten championship last year. And even though a lot of the same players for Penn State are still there, it's not the same team Penn State had last year that like has played together. They're gelled and they're comfortable and ready to go. They need to make those plays together in this season. They need to be comfortable this season. And you asked them to do a lot of things that they weren't comfortable with doing because you hadn't done them in the first 3 games. We've gone 40 minutes on this game. I want to quickly ask you 2 things. Is Penn State still a Big Ten or a national title contender for you this year?
No and no. I think that they just proved to me they're not going to beat elite teams or really good teams. We saw why. And I think they're going to be, they'll make the playoff, I bet. And they'll beat, if they get a Boise State again or SMU again, they'll win that game. Maybe. I'll have to look at the schedule.
They still have Indiana and
they'll lose at Ohio State. That's a loss. Indiana, they get at home. Let's say they go 10-2, they'll make a playoff. I don't think they're Big Ten title contenders because they're going to lose the Ohio State Oregon games. I don't think they're a national championship contender. They might make a playoff. They might win because they'll play a bad team again. But as soon as they play anybody formidable, until they prove me wrong, I don't see a world where they beat anybody substantial until then. So I'm going to say no and no.
Okay, yeah, I would say they are. Which Penn State are you going to give me? Because like I said, this was a tale of 2 games. Are you going to give me the Penn State that I saw for 85% of the game, that couldn't score, that couldn't get a first down very easily, that was trying to play not to lose at home? Or are you going to give me the Penn State that was playing with their backs against the wall, and all of a sudden you saw how fast those receivers are and how explosive that run game can be and how good Drew Allar can throw the ball when he's got time and space and the freedom to let it rip? Are you going to give me the team that had 3 points through 3 quarters, or the team that scored 21 points from the 4th quarter to the first overtime? If you give me the second team, Sure, I can tell you they're Big Ten contenders or national title contenders. I just saw the team. That's my only thing is I saw the Penn State team that I saw for 3/4 is the team I think they are, and it's unfortunate because you think you saw they have it in them to be explosive. They have it in them to have a lot of juice, but they just haven't done it. And for me, I think you got Indiana at home. That's going to be a tough game. I think you should win that. But at the same time, Indiana's looked very formidable. And against a Penn State team that, once again, hasn't shown the opportunity or the willingness to put their foot on the pedal and go score at all this year, Indiana can all of a sudden, you look up, you blink, Indiana could be up 21-3 on you because Indiana can score that fast.
And Signet
Forget what they did.
Like, he's like the Dan Lanning mentality of like, I'm going to win or lose this game, which I think James Franklin just doesn't do well against coaches like.
And you lose that game, and then you have Ohio State on the road. You're not in the playoff, buddy. You're 9-3, lost every one of your big games. And at that point, you have an argument to make about Franklin being fired. But the problem is they're always too good to justify firing for their coach, and he owed a lot of money. Bottom line for that game, for me, phenomenal game. I'm happy with the way it turned out. But at the same time, a lot of things to work on the Oregon side in terms of just game plan. But I thought everything was, you got to give flowers to the entire team. To Corian Moore, I think hasn't gotten the flowers he's deserved. It's really easy for a true freshman to go in there. We saw Jeremiah Smith against Texas this year drop three straight passes or something, 2 straight passes in the first quarter at home. It's really easy for a kid like Corian Moore to go in early on in a hostile environment and struggle. He was awesome. Dier Hill was awesome. Dante Moore, not enough can be said about how poised and in control of the offense he was. Was he special? Probably not, but I think a lot of that was Jim Knowles taking away those special potential moments. But his decision-making, his poise was special to me. And then the MVP of that game was the Oregon defensive line and the linebackers who just shut down the Penn State run game. All right. That is 43 minutes on that game. Let's go into our picks. Do you want to give everyone a recap of our picks before we get into Georgia Bama?
Let's do it. All right. First game we picked was Oregon at Penn State. Penn State was 3.5-point favorites. Farbeau and I both took Oregon. We liked them against the spread, and we liked them outright. The Ducks covered for us, so we both go 1-0 there. Game number 2, we picked Alabama at Georgia. Georgia was 3-point favorites. I was on Georgia. Farbeau was on Alabama. Alabama covers and wins. Farbeau on to 2-0. He's hot this year. I'm 1-1. LSU at Ole Miss. Ole Miss 1.5-point favorites. We were both on Ole Miss. Ole Miss won and covered. Obviously, I guess if you -1.5 and you cover, you win. Moving me to 2-1. Farbeau to 3-0 on the week. A brutal beat for both of us here. Auburn at Texas A&M. Texas A&M 6.5-point favorites. Should have probably won by a lot more than that. Should have covered for sure. They do not. They only won by 6, so both of us lose that, making me 2-2 and Farbeau 3-1. And then Ohio State at Washington. Washington was my shot in the bark, which I'll get into in a second. They do not cover. I had picked them. I doubled down on them. Farbeau went Ohio State, going 4-1 this week, bringing himself to 19-11. So if you want to make a little bit of coin, tail Farbeau. He's profitable. If you don't want to make coin, I'm 15-15, so don't fade or tail me because either way you're screwed. So I'm 15-15 on the season. Farbeau is 19-11, which is very impressive. Shot in the barks. Like I said, I had Washington plus 8.5 versus Ohio State. They looked all right. They hung in there with Ohio State. Ohio State just a better team, and they not ran away necessarily, but comfortable lead all game, and just Washington just couldn't get back into it. And then Farbeau had West Virginia plus 12.5 versus Utah. Utah, terrible just, they looked good. Yeah. I mean, Utah, that was a classic Kyle Whittingham. Like, we're going to bounce back and
get right game. Yeah.
Calibrate. Yeah. So West Virginia, unfortunately for you, Kyle Whittingham wasn't feeling that. And then they flagged for so I guess that remains, you remain at 3 points. I remain at 5 points for shot in the bark. Nothing this week for either of us. That's the first week we've both struck out too, I think. Like each week we've had at least one.
I think we struck out last week too.
Okay. So that's 2 in a row. And then flag for discussion, 4-legger. 2 for 4 on legs this week. Not our best, but also not just really brutal beats for both of us. So our 2 hits were Notre Dame -4.5 at Arkansas. Way too good of a team to give us those points. We were very into that one. And Ole Miss money line, we were just Brian Kelly in a big road game. Come on. So we were on Ole Miss money line there too. Both of those hit. The brutal beats of TCU money line on Friday night. A wild choke job from the Horned Frogs, unfortunately. So that killed the parlay on Friday, but still a tough choke job. They should have won that. And then Indiana minus 6.5 at Iowa. It didn't matter at that point because TCU had lost. They had the cover. And then the last play of the game, mind you, they didn't need to take the safety. They could have thrown it out of bounds. They could have punted it. He could have just slid down. Instead, I don't know what he was thinking, but Mendoza just ran into the end zone and then just went down. So Indiana did not cover because of that. They were up 7. It was a 6.5 point spread. He took the safety. He'd only win by 5. Again, didn't have to do it. He could have just thrown it away, punted it, slid. He literally could have done anything. And they would have won and they would have covered. That didn't happen. A lot of better.
I think
investigate that. Hey, NCA, can we get a Fernando Mendoza investigation on that safety at the end? There's something going on here. Something shady.
I think it's clear that we were on the right side for the 2 spots on that parlay that we missed, because TCU moneyline, TCU was in control of that game for a lot of it, except the second quarter when Arizona State came back. And then Indiana, we were on the right side for the whole part of it, and that was brutal. I don't want to be crying from a yacht, but that Texas A&M bad beat for both of us, it kept me from 5-0. It was a 6.5 point spread. Texas A&M won by 6. I got, buddy. Why is Vegas so right? I don't like this.
It's so annoying. How many missed that I would love to see their red zone efficiency awful in that game. Texas A&M did everything right except for finish drives, and when you're on a team 6.5, it is very frustrating to watch that.
For what it's worth, Hugh Freeze, even though he's an offensive coach, one thing he's figured out, Auburn, that defense is pretty solid. They were troubling against Alabama. Hugh Freeze cannot keep Jackson Arnold safe. That guy keeps taking sacks after sacks after sacks. I feel
their offensive line sucks.
Part of it has to be on Arnold for not recognizing some protections or whatever. I feel bad for the guy though. That guy just keeps getting destroyed. These sacks aren't even going up to him, just putting him on the ground. I was these guys are destroying Jackson Arnold. I feel bad for the kid.
It's 4-man rushes that are getting home with guys untouched. It is one double stunt, and they have a free interior D lineman running on a 4-man rush. It's what? Poor Jackson Arnold. He's probably sitting there oh, not a blitz, eyes downfield, and then he just gets destroyed. And it's tough.
Let's go into the second biggest game of the night, maybe biggest depending on where your fandom lies. 17, Alabama defeats number 5 Georgia 24-21. Alabama snapped Georgia's 33 game home win streak. The last time Georgia lost at home was October 12, 2019. They lost 20-17 to South Carolina. Kirby Smart is now 1-7 against Alabama. Obviously 0-2 against Kalen DeBoer, and then 1-5 against Nick Saban before that. And then another massive stat that we'll get into, Alabama converted 13 for third downs. Those were the most 13 is the most third downs Georgia has allowed in any game in the last 30 years. I'll be honest, this game for me, especially going up against the Oregon Penn State game, first of all, crime against humanity that both of these games were on at the same time. Second of all, this game for me, once I saw Georgia spotted Alabama 14 points again. Last year, Georgia spotted Alabama 28 points, and then they decided to start playing football. This year, it was, here's 14 points, and then we'll start playing football. Georgia did a good job trying to come back. Alabama is cooking right now. That offense looks like it's hit a level that we saw with Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb at Washington. I will say, before I continue to go on, or before I let you speak, that second half was a little troubling for Alabama's offense. It almost felt like they let their foot off the gas pedal and risked losing it. But at the same time, 7.2 yards per pass, 280 total passing yards. They had 117 rush yards. You're never going to get a massive rushing game out of Kalen DeBoer, no matter how much people want to say that Kalen DeBoer is an elite offensive coach. He is, but he sets up the pass from the run. He never will rely on the run to win in games. They went 13 of 19 on third down, 0 for 1 on fourth. They had 25 first downs to Georgia's 17. They had the ball for 35 minutes compared to Georgia's 24. They had 2 less penalties than Georgia. Georgia did their damnedest to come back in this game. That's why it was a 3-point game. But for me, it was clear that Alabama was, because of the way they walked in there and just showed the threat that they have offensively, they were in control.
Yeah, we've talked about this before. It feels like Kalen DeBoer has figured out the Kirby Smart, Dan Lanning defense. Is what 5-0 now against those two coaches, and Dan and Kirby run that same defense. Dan learned it under Kirby and ran it there, and then now they run it like Dan runs it at Oregon. He's 5-0 against that defense, and arguably in a couple of these scenarios, like with equally or maybe even slightly worse inferior teams is a better way to say it. So it feels like there's a truth to that. I think the fire that Kalen DeBoer plays with, the danger he's playing with is doesn't run the ball particularly well. Doesn't have very creative run schemes. I'll give him the credit. Even though they don't run the ball incredibly well, he still runs it often. The importance of that is you still have to respect it, because Jam Miller's too good. When he was at Washington, he had good enough running backs where if you stop respecting the run, they will get 6-7 yards. It's good running backs. It's good O-line. They'll do it. It's not creative. Like they're not like a Penn State style running game where they're gonna have 2 backs and they're gonna be all creative and funky with it. It is just enough to make you respect it, to make you try. He'll just throw over top of you, and then the second you play back, you play the pass. Okay, here's a 6-yard run. He's perfected the cadence of like, let me run the football, let me not. The danger with that comes from it late in games, and you saw it with Georgia. Georgia couldn't complete the comeback, but late in games, when you cannot run the football, you do start playing with the ability of your defense getting tired. You can lead to 3 and outs quickly. It can lead to stopped clocks if you're trying to throw it. You can throw picks. It's a dangerous game to play. Now, he's played fire, and it's done really well in Kalen DeBoer's career. Unfortunately, like the Michigan game, they just couldn't get anything going because they didn't have anything on the ground. Michigan played them perfectly, and that's kind of when you see the downfall of it. But right now, he's cooking. Right now, Ryan Grubb's cooking. Ty Simpson looks a million times more confident. And granted, I've tried my best to watch as much from the game as I can. I did not watch it last night, so it's been highlights, clips, finding recordings of drives, and a lot of like watching on box score. So excuse me for some of these takes here. But I do think there's some truth in like Ty Simpson growing as a quarterback, learning the system more. His stats look much better. The highlights of him look much better. He's smiling on the field. He looks focused, whereas he looks nervous early in the season, especially against Florida State. This is a huge confidence win for a guy like Ty Simpson. Same with Dante Moore. Going on the road as a young quarterback in your first true test and getting that win has to feel, I imagine, so good. And it's so good for your confidence and your growth. And it's dangerous. If you give Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer their quote unquote their quarterback, that's a dangerous game for the rest of the SEC. And this was a big statement to go into Athens and snap that 33-game win streak. Who does that put? I know Oregon's up there. Do we know who that puts at number 1 now? I'll look while you respond.
Oregon should be number 1. I'm pretty sure Oregon would be number 1 in terms of home win streaks left, because Washington lost and they had one of them, and then Georgia just lost. They had another. Alabama should be up there too, I think. Regardless, you're absolutely right. Ty Simpson went into this game to win the game. And I think Georgia's run game showed a lot of promise, because Georgia, one of the complaints we had last year about Georgia was they just weren't running the ball well. And they didn't have a consistent running game from Trevor Etienne. This year, they are running the ball. Their offense can be explosive. Gunnar Stockton has looked good. We saw the 44-41 win against Tennessee in Neyland on the road. We saw a very poised Georgia team. That's why I picked Alabama going into this game. I'm feeling good about that. But at the same time, if you're looking back at it, like going into that show when I was picking them, I was nervous as all hell, because I was like, this is a Kirby Smart coach team that just went into Neyland, into that level of volume, and put up 44 points. Their defense struggled, sure, but they put up 44 points and won the game. So I almost expected either Georgia to come out, control the game from the beginning and go for it, or if Alabama came out and the Georgia spotted them some points like they did this game, that Georgia would eventually come back, because they were down 21-7 against Tennessee. Look, they won 44-41. That team is extremely poised, very well coached. I just saw an article from a Georgia beat writer that said out executed, out coached, ouch. So it takes a lot of cojones to go into Athens and beat them on the road the way you did, take that lead the way you did. I mean, Alabama didn't score a point in the second half.
That's wild.
Not 1 point. Georgia scored 7. Georgia had 14 in the second quarter. They had 2 quarters. Both teams had 2 quarters in the game that they didn't score a point. Alabama, though, showed the ability that when they needed a big play, when they needed a conversion, when they needed to keep control of the football, they could do it. And that was the difference for me. I think Gunnar Stockton's an excellent quarterback, but maybe this was an aberration. Maybe it's what we kind of expected from him coming out later in the year. Because going into that Tennessee game, we weren't massive believers in Gunnar Stockton. We didn't know how much Kirby was going to put on his hands and trust him. But they did, and Gunnar Stockton had an excellent game against Tennessee on the road. This game, he went 13 to 20, 130 pass yards. He had 22 rush yards, so he wasn't really much of a difference maker on the ground or through the air. Ty Simpson, 276 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had another 12 yards and a touchdown on the ground. That is a difference maker. Alabama came to play in this game, and that is the whole argument for me. That Alabama was my pick to win the SEC. I thought if Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb get that offense going, they're going to be a machine. So for me, my argument that I made to you after Alabama lost to Florida State was, if they go into every game with this level of this lack of interest in playing football, the motor's off, they're not hyped up, they're going to lose 4 or 5 games this year. But we know the talent that they have on the field. We knew they were going to go into the Georgia game with a ton of juice. We knew they were going to go in hyped up. So that's not what I'm worried about. Now I'm worried about what their next few road games, the next few games that they go on the road and it's not Georgia. Can they still be this hyped up? Because I think that talent, that coaching is still good enough to win the SEC. I just don't Kalen DeBoer as the Alabama head coach has not given me enough reason yet to trust that team's going to come in with the same level of fire every single game. And maybe that's just because that's unfair to ask of him, because Nick Saban's literally the only coach in college football history whose teams, actually Kirby Smart too, whose teams play with an undeniable fire every single game and they don't have any flat moments. But I think Alabama showed why it can be the SEC champ. Now I just have questions on if they will go out and take it or come in with the entitlement feeling that they've had some games on the road in the past 2 years.
Yeah, I feel like this was, looking at Alabama's schedule, the biggest hurdle to the SEC championship for them, and they just passed it. Now you've got Vanderbilt ranks. I think Alabama's going to have a chip on their shoulder after last year, and that's a home game for them. They get at Missouri, which that's a team I think they're better than, but that's a tough game. You get Tennessee at home. It's a team Alabama lost to last year again, going to want to get revenge. You get that one at home. And then you get LSU at home, you get Oklahoma at home, at Auburn, at South Carolina. It's a tough schedule, no doubt about it, but a winnable schedule for Alabama. They have some revenge opportunities, which I think is a good motivator just in the middle of the season, which is a good sign for them. But the other team that I want, speaking of SEC championship, that I want to talk about is Ole Miss. They've played a lot of SEC. They're already 3-0 in the conference, by the way, which is, I think everyone else is at 1-0 right now. So first of all, they're just ahead of everybody in that regard. And they also have a pretty favorable schedule the rest of the year, barring 2 difficult away games. Are we going to get a Lane Kiffin, Kalen DeBoer SEC championship game? Would be phenomenal, by the way. But I think we're kind of trending towards that right now. Yeah, the fireworks would be incredible.
The thing is, I think Alabama's schedule, though, still gives them potholes. But what you said is absolutely correct. Where, they have all these ranked teams on their schedule. They have, oh my God, they have 5 of their last 7 games are against ranked teams, and that includes an Auburn that's not ranked but can pose trouble, and you're going on the road in the Iron Bowl game. So we've seen craziness happen in that game. Long story short, you could still walk out of this with 2 or 3 SEC losses. But the fact of the matter is that Florida State game, as much as debilitating as it was, as demoralizing as it was, as sad for you and your fan base as it wasn't a conference game. So you had all of your goals ahead of you, and winning this Georgia game gives them a lot more margin for error. Georgia, on the other hand, you could argue the same thing because they don't have a hard schedule going forward. They have Kentucky next week, Auburn on the road, Ole Miss at home. That's going to be tough, but I think they're going to come out with their hair on fire because I think it was last year that Ole Miss beat them um, at Ole Miss. And then they have Florida at home. Who knows who's coaching Florida at that point? Mississippi State on the road might be tough. Texas, Charlotte, and Georgia Tech. Georgia has a tough schedule, but I think Alabama has a bigger gauntlet to go through. And Alabama, because of that, Alabama needed to win that game more than Georgia did if they want SEC championship, if they want to make the SEC championship game. You're absolutely right. We'll get into Ole Miss in 2 seconds. That game for me, though, it just, like, my bottom line, I don't think less of Kirby Smart. I don't think less of Georgia. I think they played a good game. I think it showed Alabama's potential if they just show up with a fire every game. And that's the disappointing part of like that Florida State game for me, or the Vanderbilt game last year, or the Oklahoma game last year. If we can make this consistent, Alabama is a force to be reckoned with in that conference. Let's get into your favorite team. Ole Miss beat number 13 Ole Miss beats number 4 LSU 24-19. I mean, this is you got high school flesh and blood in this game. I want you to break it down for me.
Yeah, I think there was 2 things that were true in this game. The LSU defense is legit, but I also think Trinidad's legit. I think both of those things, I know it's weird because it's the quarterback and defense, but I think both things were true in that game. I'll start with my LSU reactions from this game. I'll start with the positives. The LSU's defense is legit. For how much they had to play, for how long Ole Miss's drives were, for how many quick 3-and-outs and quick turnovers that their offense, the turnovers, just punts in general, put out there, their defense played hard. And they to only go up 24 points at Ole Miss, given how much they had to kind of carry that team, was very impressive. I thought the LSU defense is legit. They're incredible, given the circumstances especially. I think that's true. Now I'm going to get into the LSU offense, which I think where the issues are going to lie, obviously. First of all, the lack of a run game is embarrassing, and it's going to kill them this year. I get they didn't have Caden Durham in this game. I get that. That doesn't change the fact that you have to. Yeah, they weren't doing anything with him, and that doesn't change the fact that they didn't even pose a threat. Ole Miss was just dropping 8 into coverage, and LSU still could not figure out a way to get any yards. You need to have some HV draw in your playbook where, okay, if they're going to drop 8 every freaking play, we need to have some sort of draw that'll give us a free 7-8 yards, because that's free. That's football. That you play you're the number 4 team in the country in the SEC. You need to have some semblance of a run game. And if you, for whatever reason, really don't have the O linemen, the running backs, and the plays in your playbook to run the football in some fashion, look at like the Ben Arbuckle style. Like, they don't run the football much, like Ben Arbuckle's offenses, but they have like wide receiver screens, running back screens, like quick under routes, quick drags that replace a run game. Where if someone's dropping 8 back, throw a quick screen to a running back or a quick screen to a wide receiver, and at least they can weasel for 6-7 yards, and that will replace your run game. Will Stein does it. Ben Arbuckle does it. It's becoming hot. Like, LSU needs to adopt something, because they just it feels like they're just trying to air the ball out every single play. And I get you have a gunslinger quarterback. Let him gunsling when you need to. Let him gunsling, early in games or on 3rd and 1s or 2nd and 1s. But it doesn't need to, 1st and 10 doesn't need to be a 40-yard pass, and 2nd and 10 doesn't need to be a 35-yard pass over the middle. And then you end up in 3rd and 10 where it's like, okay, Ole Miss can drop 8 in coverage, and you don't even have a drag route to at least force them to come up. It's an ugly offense right now. Nussmeier, he should have probably went pro in hindsight last year when he would have been a 1st-round pick. He hasn't looked great, but it's hard. I mean, we both know, and when your offense is really predictable and you're only doing one thing and you can't do anything else, it's hard. He's not playing great. He's not helping the case, but they're not helping him either.
Your word right there is predictable. I hate to make Garrett Nussmeier any part of this problem. I think We saw 2 weeks ago Brian Kelly scream at a reporter for asking what's wrong with the run game because they beat Florida despite they beat them by 10, despite having 5 turnovers in that game. And they could only muster up 20 points off those 5 turnovers. The fact of the matter is, we say LSU's run game is bad. Let's look at the numbers. 59 rushing yards in 21 attempts. That's 2.8 yards per rush. They had 7 penalties. That's fine. Ole Miss had 14. Ole Miss had the ball for longer. LSU had 7 less penalties. LSU had 1 less turnover, and they could not muster up and the game was this close. So that's credit to their defense. Yeah. Ole Miss had 12 more first downs. Ole Miss went 8 of 16 on third down. LSU went 2 for 11. You know why you go 2 for 11 on third down? Because your third downs are 3rd and 5 because you can't run the ball. It's not because it's 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3. And you're just putting so much pressure on Garrett Nussmeier and that team to perform. And Kelly owes an apology to that reporter who, I know he already apologized, but he owes a second apology to him because it's just the fact that LSU, who's not known to have a good defense, they have good defensive players, and they have Pete Golding, who's a solid DC, former Alabama DC. They have pieces there to make them good, but Ole Miss is known for their offense under Lane Kiffin. The fact that this Ole Miss team said we can drop 8 into coverage and still get a pass rush on you with 3 guys rushing is embarrassing. I don't care if you're Brian Kelly. I don't care if you are the head coach of small town high school B. If that happens to you, you got to rework everything. Because I understand you're on the road, but you're telling Garrett Nussmeier, hey, we're going to need you to drop back a bunch. And by the way, the defense knows you're throwing it because we don't have any disguise or confusion or mystery in our offense. We know we can't run the ball. They know we can't run the ball. Oh, by the way, there's 8 people in coverage. Try to find a hole somewhere and try to hit them. Garrett Nussmeier didn't play great, but he almost didn't get a chance to. And that's my entire issue with why was this is what we were talking about going into this game. It's LSU was ranked 4th. How much of that ranking was because they beat a 3rd-ranked Clemson team to open the season, and now we know how bad Clemson is right now. The AP poll's whack, but I mean, there's a reason you and I haven't believed in LSU much this season. I think they still have the offensive playmakers and defense to win a lot of games, but I mean, if you're going into any SEC game, I'm pulling up their schedule right now. They got South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Texas A&M, Alabama, and Oklahoma in terms of their hard games left in the year. If you can't run the ball, each of those games is going to be hard for
you. Yeah. And the difference between Brian Kelly offense right now and the Kalen DeBoer offense, both of those teams can't really run the football at the moment. At least Alabama and DeBoer try, because they know it might be for 2 or 3 yards every time. But the fact that they're doing it 30 plus times a game and they at least try as a defense makes you you can't rush 3 and drop 8 in coverage against Alabama because they are going to run the football if you do that. It might not be great. It might not be the prettiest thing, but they're going to do it and it'll work. Obviously, if you're rushing 3, dropping 8 in coverage, you're going to get 5 yards every time. Yeah. The fact that Brian Kelly is oh, well, we can't do it, therefore I'm not even going to try. That's the problem. That is why Ole Miss is dropping 8 in coverage and why Georgia can't drop 8 in coverage, right? And that's the difference between Alabama going on the road in Athens and getting a big win and LSU fighting to come back in a game on the road against a lesser opponent in Ole Miss. That's the difference. And I think Brian Kelly needs to hit the drawing board, and that needs to be reworked on offense. Also, side note, Jaden Daniels just got to be so mad. If he had this defense, LSU probably wins a national championship.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about Ole Miss because I think there's more excitement here.
You.
Like I said, 3-0 in the conference already puts them at the top. Their remaining schedule, they have some tough road games. They play at Georgia. They play at Oklahoma. They're lined up to play Oklahoma. It looks like Mateer would be back by then, but it might be game 1 or 2 back potentially. That depends on that timeline. Then at Mississippi State, which I want to mention because they don't seem like a slouch right now. They seem pretty good. Jeff Levy's got them moving down in Starkville. Yeah. And then their home games, they get South Carolina and Florida. 2, I think, winnable home games, but also decent teams. Trinidad should be QB1 moving forward. He looks like a stud. I think he's 6th now in the Heisman voting, which is pretty awesome.
Crazy.
He's a dog. He can move the ball with his legs. Looks good throwing the football. And he's used to D2 football. Like, he's only going to get better as he learns more with Lane Kiffin, as he gets used to what SEC speed and football looks like. He's only going to improve, and he's already looks naturally really good. He looks comfortable. He looks confident. Very humble kid. Like, I'm excited to see where the season takes him. They also have a lot of playmakers. Their running back, Kawan Lacey, looks like a dog. He runs hard. Maybe not the most explosive running back, but he runs hard. He's a consistent running back that I really liked out of them. And then Caden Lee, the wide receiver, go up and get it kind of guy. A lot of contested catches that Ole Miss wide receivers were making. Great hands, good footwork. There wasn't a lot of separation with the Ole Miss receivers, but they were making the plays, which is huge. And then their tight end, Daquan Wright, is a beast. He was the one that kind of had the ice game catch where he slid down at the end. This is a tough team. This is a team that has a really good offense. They can run the ball. They can throw the ball. They have weapons at tight end, at wide receiver, at running back, now that quarterback too. And their defense was the big question mark coming into this game. Granted, we've talked about the LSU woes offensively, but the defense looked really good. Not much to say about the run game. LSU doesn't really do that, but they shut down Nussmeier for the most part in the air. I thought they had a good game plan. I thought they executed well. They held LSU to 19 points. This is a dangerous team going forward. If they can pull off 2 of those 3, if they can beat Mississippi State on the road and take one of the Georgia-Oklahoma games and then win the home ones, they'll find themselves in the SEC championship game and definitely a playoff. So this is a fun team. They're going to be a lot of fun to watch this year. And Lane Kiffin's got himself a good squad. I think maybe a little bit underrated, to be honest.
I think completely underrated, because last year was almost Ole Miss's circled year of, we have a bunch of returning seniors with Jackson Dart and company, but we're going to go out and use a transfer portal, bring in Walter Nolan, bring in like a bunch of studs to make sure we're ready to compete everywhere. And they lost a couple heartbreakers. And you thought last year's team was really good. This year's team looks like it hasn't skipped a beat. And if you're looking at Trinidad, to be honest with you, I know that you knew Trinidad in high school, and we talked about him going into the year, but I think everyone was on the Austin Simmons train going into this season. And part of that is because of Lane Kiffin. Part of that is Austin Simmons looked pretty good in the past. Trinidad operates that offense really well, and
yeah,
there's nothing that team should be scared of. The only thing I'll say is Arkansas kind of cooked them defensively. If they fix those issues, then great. But theoretically, they gave up 19 points to an LSU team that can't score the ball. I mean, that can't run the ball. It was a good LSU team. That defense needs to continue getting better if they want to really have a good shot of making the SEC title game or going further. But everything we've seen from them so far has been pretty elite.
Yeah. I think Ole Miss has put themselves in a really good spot. I think they're playing as the underdog, and I think they're being treated as that. I think that's probably what's best for this team. And like I said, this is a team I think is only QB switch middle of the season, early in the season. New QB looks really good. If they stick with him and he keeps growing, this is a team that I think is going to be very dangerous as the season goes on. And as we talked about in the preview show, the benefit you get with Trinidad at the moment is there's not a lot of film or tape or understanding of what his weaknesses are and like how to stop him. Now, as the season goes on, that there's a lot of good coaches in the SEC. Someone's going to figure out, what his weaknesses might be, and someone's going to figure out that. But until then, it's hard to stop a kid that you don't really know what his bread and butter is. And right now, he's throwing down the field well. He's throwing intermediate well. He's running the football well. He's reading it well. Even his interception, both his turnovers were tipped, like hit his receiver 2 hands, bounce in the air, intercepted. They were contested throws, but they hit the hands of the receiver. You never really want to give quarterback too much doubt, or frustration when they're hitting guys in the hands. They're just not making the plays. This is an offense that has a really high ceiling, and I think, like you mentioned, the defense is going to be the question mark. They've been cooked before. They'll probably get cooked again. Can their offense outpace that? We'll see. But their defense looked much improved against LSU, and if you're an Ole Miss fan, or you're Ole Miss in general, that's a huge improvement. That's a good sign of where your team is at and your coaching. And by the way, they have the players defensively. They have elite defensive ends. They have a really good D-line. They have the pieces. Maybe it's just putting it together. But this is a frisky team. I would love a Lane Kiffin Kalen DeBoer SEC championship game. That would be a lot.
That would be a lot of fun. That would be great. One last note on this: Trinidad is one of those quarterbacks that I would say a third of the coaches across the country are in their recruiting player personnel offices saying, "How did that guy find him to be a backup? And why didn't we find him? Because look at our starter. We could use him as our starter." And so there's a good amount of teams in the country every year, and like this happens a decent amount where you see a coach like Lane Kiffin or a program, his player personnel people do a little bit extra work, find an offense that worked at a lower level and get their best player, get their quarterback, get their receiver, someone that worked at that and bring him up to the bigger level. And all of a sudden, whoa, it's working. And all of a sudden, you as a coach that's trying to get your 4 or 5 star kids, go for it. But there are a lot of sleepers out there that you haven't found yet. And Trinidad is an awesome story so far. I just want him, and I hope this makes sense, I just want him to not be a story anymore. I want him to be the quarterback. And not in
Agreed.
I'm not saying that in a bad way at all, but it's a shame to me whenever guys are seen as narratives and stories instead of how good the guy is actually playing. Like, the guy's playing really good quarterback, and it's no longer like an inspiring story. It's like he's the leader of the Ole Miss team right now. He's going to try to go win the SEC.
Yeah.
Couple quick hits before we wrap up. We're running up against the clock. Virginia, I got to shout out your fans. Unbelievable field storm against Florida State.
Textbook. Teach tape field storm right there.
There were too many people on Twitter saying this. Now I understand why field storms get fines and this shouldn't happen. I'm like, you guys are petty. If that was your team, you would love it. And I mean, we saw the Oregon game after Dylan Thieneman intercepted the ball. The entire defense ran to the Penn State student section, like dapping him up and like just putting it in their face. And there was I'm assuming there's some Penn State fan out there saying, "Look at this classless team doing this, rubbing it in our kids' faces." And my response to that would be, do you realize if it was the opposite, all of those kids would be rushing the field right now doing the same thing to our team? So it goes both ways here. So great job, Virginia. Great job, Florida State. You watched the Illinois USC game. It was in your state. Do you have any takeaways from there?
USC offense is entirely legit. Jaden Maiava and Michael Lemon look like the real deal. They make me nervous. That's one of the more elite offenses. And I think that's a quarterback wide receiver duo that's not being talked about that needs to be. That's going to be an offense that scores a lot of points. Their defense is a big question mark. It looks like a typical Lane Kiffin style team. On the flip side, Illinois, great bounce back win. That's good culture. That's good coaching. You got your ass kicked the week prior to a good team. To turn it around in 5 days, get your focus back, get your focus right, and win a big one at home like that. Good coaching. Those are two good teams. It'll be interesting to see what that plays in the Big Ten picture. I think they solidified that, like, they're in that tier 2 right now of the Big Ten. There's the big dogs, and then I think Illinois and USC sit in that second tier, which is no slouch in the Big Ten. It's a good place to be. Those are two good football teams that played.
The USC offense, I think one of the reasons that it looks so damn good right now is, I don't know what it was during this game. I mean, I watched it, but I don't know what the exact numbers are. But going into this game, they had a 55-45 run pass split. And now everyone sees Lincoln Riley's offenses, especially at Oklahoma, as like this pass first, pass a lot, pass downfield offense. But Lincoln runs the ball with his best teams. Even his best team at USC so far, Travis Dye and that team, they ran the ball to set up Caleb's offense. So they can run the ball right now. And I hate that I don't remember the running back's name, but just a really great offense
Wayman
by
Jordan. I think he's a
Wayman Jordan,
kid, right?
Yeah, and they've looked elite on offense. Their defense has some work to do, and that was a question going into this game because their defense was their defense was overhauled from last year. Their defense is big now to compete in the Big Ten, but they're having just body type right now is clear that it's not enough when you're going on the road against a formidable Big Ten opponent. They ended up getting gassed and pushed around a little bit, and that's why Illinois won. But USC scares me. Illinois sometimes scares me, but mostly USC. Despite USC,
those are two good
losing
football
this game.
teams. Those are two very good football teams that played in Champaign, and I think I think they both deserve respect. That even though the outcome wasn't in favor of USC, they deserve respect. That was a formidable outing and a tough spot. And then Illinois, they hung on. They looked good. Great bounce back. Two good football teams played. I think the Big Ten should be weary of both of them.
Yes. And then Tennessee, that was a fun game to watch and have on like the corner TV or in the corner screen, Tennessee, Mississippi State, because it was the same offense playing each other. It was two versions of the veer and shoot offense playing each other, and it looked like it was 41-34 in overtime. Tennessee just ended up making the last play. It was a great game to watch. I don't have much else to say. I only threw that in there because I was like, man, Mississippi State might be real.
Yeah, Jeff Levy's got them turned around quickly. They beat Arizona State, was it 2 weeks ago? This is a team that's, what were they, 4-0 going to this game? They're a good team. So it's a team that won 2 games last year. Mississippi State, not much has been going on in Starksville for a while now. This is probably the most exciting start to a season they've had in our lifetime.
I haven't guaranteed
stuff. Jeff Levy's a good coach.
I haven't checked this stat, so it might be wrong, but McAfee on game day said this is the first time they've been 4-0 since Dak Prescott was their quarterback. Like, this is a almost unprecedented start for Mississippi State that's gone through Mike Leach, unfortunately, is passing, had Joe Moorhead, Dan Mullen leave them for Florida. This is great stuff. And honestly, it shows me another reason why Oklahoma tanked so much after hiring a bad offensive coordinator last year, because Jeff Levy left them. It's just that level of coaching fall off. It's hard. And then the last tidbit I had, I just threw it in there. Fernando Mendoza wants to apologize to you and me, Jace. He said, coach told him, take a safety, run out of the end zone. When I got to the 2 and I saw zeros on the clock, I saw all zeros on the clock, but I kept going. And he says, I know I really cooked people's spreads. My apologies out to them. These guys are aware of it, but he did. Luckily for us, that spread was picked in a parlay, and we already lost the first leg of it, so it doesn't hurt as much. But if TCU won, if TCU won and that was the difference for us, I would be so mad.
Yeah, I'm glad he's aware of it. Also, that makes me think, I don't want to go too long here, but Ole Miss, when Lane Kiffin said take the over, I called it. I said that means take the under. Everyone's going to take the over. It's not going to hit. And it was right. Also, he made sure he let Landry's boyfriend know who the boss still is in the 100% right there. So good for him.
Yes. On that note, it's been so much fun, man. Week 5 is done. A lot of great stuff happened this weekend. We saw Alabama. We saw 2 massive home upsets. Even though you could argue that they shouldn't have been labeled as upsets, we saw 2 massive home upsets. We saw a couple big games. USC's looking real, even though they lost. I mean, even Iowa putting up 13 points and then 15 with the safety, that looked fine. Like there was a lot of great games. That Friday night start to the weekend with Virginia, Florida State might be my favorite Friday night of the year, and might be for the rest of the year my favorite Friday night. I'm sure there's gonna be better, but the way that game happened, shout out to Coach Elliott and Virginia and Chandler Morris. That was fun. You have any more takeaways on this week?
No, I'm hour and a half. I'm running thin on the bladder here, so I'm all good.
Yes, me too. Thanks for staying with us. Thanks for keeping up with us. We appreciate you so much for watching and listening. If you liked what you heard, what you saw, liked our beautiful faces, make sure you're following us on TikTok at Flag, the number 4 discussion, on Twitter at F4 discussion, on YouTube. Subscribe to us at Flag for Discussion. Make sure you subscribe and give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, at Flag for Discussion. Week 5 is done. What a week. We're about to hit week 6, and there's going to be even more big games coming up. The playoff picture's starting to take place a little bit more, and we are really amping up for the middle of the season. For myself, Robert Merkazi, my lovely partner, Jace Hatfield, this has been Flag for Discussion. Talk to you later.